Do you feel like you took a wrong turn in life? Welcome to Morrow's Motivations, where we talk with people who educate, motivate, and captivate you with inspirational stories. Here's Dontrell.
I'm excited to introduce my next guest, Dr. Benjamin Hardy. He is an organizational psychologist and a successful entrepreneur. He's the best-selling author of Willpower Doesn't Work and Personality Isn't Permanent. His blog is read by millions of people monthly, and he has been featured on Forbes, Fortune, CNBC, Cheddar, Big Thing, and many other organizations. He adds priceless values to audiences around the world to help them break free from the shackles of what they perceive as permanent personality. He is a regular contributor to Inc. and Psychology Today and one of the most popular writers on Medium. He speaks and trains at a wide range of events. He and his wife, Lauren, adopted 3 children through the foster care system in February of 2018, and 1 month later, Lauren became pregnant with twins who were born in December of 2018. They currently reside in Orlando, Florida. All right, thank you so much for joining me today, Dr. Hardy. How are you doing, my friend?
Good. How are you, my good man? You're a good friend of mine. I've known you for 10 years or more.
Yes, we have. It's such a wonderful thing. I have to admit, this is actually one of the interviews that I am most excited about because it's a good reunion with a friend who I can say that we served in one of the most important works of existence, missionary work, serving the children of God out here in the world. And it helped us really to grow in so many ways. And you know, you look back at that time, and I don't know if you felt this way, but when I look back, I thought that things were so challenging in a lot of ways and difficult. And it's probably true that in a lot of ways they were, because we were on the tail end of the 2008 recession. And, you know, that was a big thing, you know, going on. And now looking right now when we're dealing with COVID-19 and just the ramifications of a couple of months of that so far, it's just mind blowing. And so, but the one thing that stayed constant and the one thing that I love is your obvious commitment to service, and then also just being able to try to help people with your motivational messages through these uncertain times that we're in, through these rough little challenges that we're going through. So, yeah, thank you, my friend, for taking time, I guess, in this quarantine to come in and chat with me.
I'm more than happy to be with you. I would rather be nowhere else than with Dontrell Morrow at this moment. One thing I recently heard, I heard this from, what's his name? Who's the amazing investor from Omaha, Nebraska? You got to know this. Come on, Dontrell. What's his name? Let me look it up real quick. This is embarrassing.
No, I'm drawing a blank
Buffett.
too, my
It's
friend.
Buffett.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. What's his name? What's his name? Sorry, I'm totally lost.
You okay?
Here we go. What the heck is his name? Okay, Warren Buffett. Holy cow, that's embarrassing.
Warren Buffett.
That was ridiculous. I can't believe I forgot Warren Buffett's name. So anyways, one of the things that Warren Buffett recently said, which is super important, is he said, because people are asking him about the market, and they're saying, you know, where's the market going to be in 10 months from now? And he's like, and Warren Buffett said, I can't predict where the market's going to be in 10 months, in 5 weeks, in 10 days. He said, I can never predict it on any specific day. But he said, here's what I do know. In 20 years from now, I can say with absolute certainty that the market will be better than it is now. And I think that that's a good mindset. It's like regardless of COVID-19, regardless of the 2008 crash, regardless of what's going to happen in 4 or 5 years from now, one thing we can be sure of is that generally and on average, in 20 years from now, the market's going to be better. And the market's not really what we're talking about, but like life can get better and better over time. You shouldn't judge it on how one day's going, you know?
Absolutely. And you're right. Through each of these challenges, the one thing that you've been able to, I believe, help individuals do is focus on your mindset and having that outlook of what things could and would be like if we come at it in a way of seeing things in a reality the way that they are. So for the listeners out there, so you've been able to go out and you got your doctorate as an organizational psychologist. And I saw one of the TED Talks that you did, and it really stood out to me where you were really talking about just the power of how circumstance really shapes your will and your desire to accomplish great things, that it's not just something necessarily that you start out with, and it's something that you have to kind of let circumstance build you and test you to see what you're made of and what you can do. So personally for yourself, because I do want to talk about that because I found that absolutely fascinating. But what I want to ask you personally is for yourself, from the time that we had the opportunity to meet and serve together in the church, what directed you to go down the path that you're at now? Like, what personal examples did you have
What went through
in
my
your
head
life?
that led me to
Yeah.
this crazy
Yeah,
conclusion?
like what personal examples did you have that navigated you down this path to your current career?
Yeah. I mean, when it was while we were there in Pittsburgh together, Dontrell. I mean, when I was
Mhm.
having those experiences, I was writing in my journal a lot. I mean, I had stacks of journals. I mean, I wrote in my journal for about an hour a day on my mission. And I
Wow.
wasn't a writer before that. I wasn't a journaler, but I took my mission very seriously. Like anyone who was my companion, like I was like, and but like also I'm not like a judgmental kind of guy. I just was like, I just wanted to learn as much as I could, and so while I read a lot of books. I actually got permission from our mission president, President Summerhays. He let me read
Hmm.
almost whatever I wanted because I was waking up early and reading during lunch breaks and reading at night. And like, so I started reading a lot of books. I actually read a lot of Stephen Covey when I was on my mission. I read a lot of great books. I read a lot of, mostly religious books, but I read a lot of personal development as well. And I was reading and I was doing journaling and stuff. And it was on my mission that I decided I wanted to be a writer. I didn't know what kind of writer I was going to be. I thought maybe I'll go work for the church and write religious books. But then when I got home and started studying psychology, I decided that I wanted to write more mainstream books. And then ultimately I got mentorships. And so it's been a process, and I decided on my mission that I wanted to write books. I just didn't know what form or fashion. And then
Hmm.
just through the process of educating myself and going through my education and looking at career options, I decided that I wanted to do it in more of a bigger form.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you knew then that you were going to do something in the world of literature, but you were just trying to navigate just what that would be because of how much you were learning and retaining at that time.
Yeah, and I just loved it. I loved reading. And I was not a reader beforehand, but I loved reading stuff and just felt like I was growing so much in my mission. I loved writing. I loved writing in my journal. I mean, I wrote in my journal this morning.
Hmm.
And so I just thought this seems like it would be a great career. I didn't know if it was something I could do full time. I thought maybe I'd be like a religion teacher or professor, something like that. But ultimately, I ended up kind of going more business and psychology.
That's awesome. And so while you were in college after the mission, did you like what steps did you take initially to kind of work towards the writing, specifically?
I didn't really do too much specifically, to be honest with you, for quite a few years. I mean, I got home in basically January of 2010,
Hmm.
and I just went to school. I was just focused on getting like knocking out the bachelor, learning as much as I could, getting married, and I was writing in my journal a lot, and I was reading tons. I was reading like 40, 50 books a year, and I was like really learning and stuff like that. But I was not really taking active steps until we moved out to South Carolina in 2014. And then that's when I was like, okay, it's time for me to like really, now I'm in graduate school, I'm getting my PhD. Like it's time for me to really like start taking this thing seriously. And so I started learning the process of how to become a professional author.
Okay, so you moved out there, and so you started doing that. Now you talk about something, and correct me if I'm wrong in pronouncing it, but the Pygmalion effect. That
Mm.
was one thing I saw in your TED talk, and you talked about it about saying that we are the product of situations. And I wanted to know if you kind of like how you discovered that and how that played into your own story. I'm guessing learning that term and what that means.
Yeah, I mean, what the Pygmalion effect is that you rise or fall to the expectations or the demands of the situation. And there's a good quote from William Durant. He's a famous historian, but he said basically that the ability of the average person could be doubled if the situation demanded it. And so, I mean, I've seen that. Like when I grew up, I mean, my parents got divorced, and there was not very much parental expectation. So, I mean, I kind of plummeted my motivation. I didn't really do that much. I barely graduated high school. There was no one telling me to go to school. When I decided to go on my mission, there was a much higher bar of expectation, and so I really focused on being the best missionary I could be.
Mhm.
And ultimately you set your own expectations. I mean, that's the key, is that you get into situations where the expectations are above what you would typically hold yourself to. That's why they say marry above. You marry up, because you marry someone who has higher expectations for you than you have for yourself, so that you can grow into that. When we became foster parents of 3 kids, all of a sudden I went from like having 0 kids to having 5, or sorry, to having 3. And all of a sudden, like there was so much more required of me from one day to the next, where like one day we were just, me and my wife, just graduate students, just chilling and watching Netflix. The next day we've got these 3 kids that like demand all of our attention. So you have to rise to those situations if you're committed to the purpose. And we were committed. That's why we put ourselves in that situation. And the situation forced us to become much different and much better than we would otherwise. Like there's a lot of like for example, an arch. What they say is if you want to strengthen an arch, you actually put more weight upon it, so that like the arch really becomes stronger. And it's not by like removing pressure, it's by putting more pressure on that you strengthen and fortify the arch. And that's exactly how people are. Like people need challenge, they need difficulty to grow, to give their life meaning and purpose. And so I think what my main point with that TED Talk was, is that people often think it's removing negative or challenging situations that makes you happy, but that's not what's going to make you happy.
I agree. When I listened to your talk, it resonated with me because it reminded me of a very challenging time when I was going through graduate school, because that was a time where it seemed like all the challenges and the negativity that could have actually came to me came at that specific time. I mean, I had a troubled roommate at the time that was doing drugs, which was stressful. To come home to that situation, I was doing at least 2 to 3 internships, which is where I kind of learned a little bit about podcasting in one of those internships. I was working full time as an enrollment counselor for a school, and I was also doing full-time school. And I was so stressed out. I was probably getting about 3 to 4 hours of sleep for at least 8 months straight. It's hard to even remember when I think back to those times, because I was just in like robot mode, I guess, just trying to get it done. But there were so many days, Ben, where I did not want to, I didn't want to get out of bed.
Yeah, it was hard.
It was literally hard, and I didn't know if I could do it. There were some days where I thought, I just can't do it anymore. I don't know if I have the energy. But then when you talked about, that, and I had to write this down, because you said you are never pre-qualified to do something amazing or to achieve big goals. It's the load that you are carrying that transform you and becomes your why. And for me, that is so true, because my why at that time was obviously to get through that challenge, to get the degree and to move on to, better, career opportunities. But I realized that was the goal, and that was the focus that got me through that. And the load of that was my motivation, because I wanted to get out of that bad roommate situation. I wanted to stop working so many different jobs and just have one focus. And so when you teach this principle, what has something been that you said that you would say that a load, how does it really like manifest you? Like, what does your mindset have to be for that to really occur? Because there's a lot of people that go through stress and they feel like nothing happens. And if they didn't have that stress, things would be a lot better.
Yeah, you have to have a purpose for it. You have to have a purpose for your life. If you don't have a purpose and a future, then the load becomes destructive. You have to have a future goal, and that future goal gives meaning to the load. It gives meaning to the suffering. It gives meaning to the challenge. And so if you don't have a future and a purpose for doing it, then there's no reason to take on a load. Why would you do it? But if you have a future worth creating, and if you have a future self worth becoming, then that purpose gives your load perspective. It gives your load meaning, and it gives your load, it allows you to get through it in a powerful transformational way. So it's not just about taking on challenges for the sake of challenging. It's not about taking on suffering for the sake of suffering. It's about having a goal that's worth pursuing and taking on challenging situations that transform you into the type of person that can have your goals. Like I wanted to become a good person. I wanted to become a good father. And just because I wanted that doesn't mean that's what I was. Once we became parents of 3 kids out of nowhere, I realized how impatient I was, how rude and how judgmental and how easily frustrated I was. Like the situation really shined a highlight on the weaknesses I didn't even know I had. A lot of people think that they're good people, but then you put them in a situation where it's like, maybe you're not the kind of person you actually thought you were when push comes to shove. And so like I wanted attributes that I didn't have. And so we put ourselves in a situation, and we became parents, and that allowed us to become the type of people we wanted to be, but we weren't yet. And it allowed us to have the type of life where we were focused on other people's needs, and we had a great family. And like, you don't just get those things. You can't just think your way to having these things. You've got to want it, and then you've got to go through the extreme change process that gets you there. And that change process is something we call deliberate practice in psychology, but it's having a future goal and then going through the process of change to become that person. And you can't go through that process of change without a purpose. But if you have that process, or if you have that purpose and that vision, you can go through almost anything.
That's awesome. I remember times on the mission.
Yeah, you had that purpose, and that allowed you to think about what you did, Morrow, on your mission. You would not have been able to do any of that if you didn't have a purpose for doing it.
Right. No, it's exactly
I
right.
wouldn't have done any of the stuff I did on my mission without that purpose.
Especially during some of the tougher times, because you weren't always, well, I don't know about yourself, but I know I wasn't always with people that I immediately clicked with or got along with. And so it's true. Like, a lot of those circumstances brought out things that's like, wow, I didn't even know that kind of thing annoyed me, or I didn't know, like, just different things like that. And I'm sure the same could be said undoubtedly about myself in that same area and criteria, but it's true. But the purpose was I was there to serve, and I wanted to complete, that 24 months. And I'm thankful. I'm thankful that I did that. I look back at that and
too. I guarantee your life is so much better because you learned how to handle that situation, right?
I learned how to handle it, but I also learned the importance, I think then, of mentorship, because I had a lot of leaders, like our district leaders, zone leaders, mission president, these people that were helpful and motivating and saying, or being that voice of reason and saying, don't give up, or what are you here for? Trying to make you remember the most important reasons of why you were doing something. That to me helped out a lot. And one day I'd hope to be a parent, and I've definitely thought about foster care and about adoption as well. But how did you said it's something that you have to kind of grow into, like you have to want it and then you have to pursue it. So how do you get yourself to be into the mindset of knowing something that you want, even when you may not clearly know it's something at that point that you do want, if that makes any sense?
Here's how it works. You have your current preferences, you have your current self, and your current preferences don't matter that much. What matters is your future self, the person you want to be. Who you want to be matters more than who you are. And so, if you're someone who wants to be a husband and a father, if that's something that you really want, then you got to say, what kind of person do you need to be today in order to become that person? What your future self matters more than your current self. And so it may require courage, for example, to ask a girl on a date, or to become someone who can be in a healthy relationship. That may be difficult in the moment. It may go against your current preferences to sit on the couch and relax, or to avoid the courage of going and asking the girl on the date. Your current preferences in the moment don't matter, though, because your current preferences are just to be at ease or to avoid conflict or avoid uncertainty. What matters more is what your future self wants and who you want to be in the future, and you use that to determine what you do in the moment. And so that's kind of the key, is to decide who you really want to be in the future and use that as the basis for what you do today. And when you do that, then you can actually make progress towards your goals. Yes, that means you're going to have to face some fears. It means you're going to have to deal with uncertainty. It means you might have to face some disappointments. It means but that's how you become flexible and confident as a person. So, I mean, that's really the key. And I think one other key element of all of this is to ask yourself, is the thing you want the thing you should want? Because just because you want something doesn't mean it's what you should want. You may want to go get drunk or go get high, but just because you want something maybe doesn't mean you should want it. And maybe what would your future self want? So I think it's good to question your goals and maybe say, could I have better goals? Is there something better I could or should pursue? But yeah, those are some thoughts.
No, that's excellent. That's excellent. And that's true. Just kind of always focusing on what you're feeling at the moment, so that you know if it's something that's worth having or something that'll cause more harm in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, your feelings in the present matter very little, honestly. We call it psychological flexibility, because sometimes in the moment you don't want to do something. Sometimes, as a missionary, sometimes you didn't want to go knock the door. Sometimes you didn't want to get out of bed. But your feelings in the moment don't matter. What matters is the goal. What matters is the purpose. What matters is what you're trying to accomplish, and use that to determine what you do, not your present feelings. Who do you really want to be? And once you've decided who you want to be, and you don't just make the decision once, it's not like it's a final decision. It's just like, what are your goals for the next 2 to 3 years? Who's the person you want to be in 2 to 3 years from now? Then, you got to ask yourself how committed you are. One of the ways to increase your commitment is to start telling people about your goals. Just as an example, I remember when I got serious about dating, and like, where I was like, okay, I'm ready to get married. I started going to therapy, and I started to say I'm ready to get married, and like, it changed how I dated. I'm like, okay, I'm now dating for the purpose of marrying. I'm not just dating so that I can hang out with girls. Like, I'm now changing the reason I'm dating, and I'm now going to tell people, look, like, I'm serious about getting married now. Like, if that's not where you're at, like, this may not work. Like, I now became serious and honest and vocal about my goal. And then I started to get help getting out of my own way. I needed to find out why it wasn't working. That's why I started going to therapy and realizing, oh, I need to get better at emotionally connecting. Like, if I'm serious about this goal, there's certain things I need to change, because in the past it hasn't really worked. And so, like, once you get serious about a goal, then you get serious about becoming the type of person who can have that goal. And you start being open and honest that that's what you're trying to go for, and you stop hiding your goals. So those are some thoughts.
That's excellent. How did you feel when you realized that you had achieved a lot of the personal goals that you set for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think you never really arrive. And so, I mean, I've achieved almost every goal that I've set to some degree. There's been many big failures and big blunders, but I've achieved a lot in my life, and it doesn't make you feel any better as a person, to be honest with you. Like, I think you always need a purpose. You never get to a point where you've gotten to the point where you don't need a future. The future is what gives your meaning present. And so it's nice to have achieved some things, and it gives you more ability to keep going, but my focus is on the future. My focus is on where I'm trying to go. That doesn't mean I don't enjoy the present. I enjoy the heck out of the present, but I'm not giving up on the future just because I've achieved some things in my past. So, I mean, it does feel pretty great. It builds your confidence, but I still have a purpose that goes to the end of my life and beyond my life, And so I'll just keep pursuing meaningful goals along the way, and struggling, and hopefully learning, and hopefully helping people in better ways along the way.
How important would you say is having confidence and moving towards a goal, and like just being able to keep yourself moving through each life stage?
Confidence is essential. Courage is how you build confidence. So whatever your goal is above your current level of confidence. Like, you've set the goal, which requires courage to achieve it. And as you pursue that goal and make progress, you'll start to build confidence that you can do it. So the more confidence you have, the more willing you will be to pursue goals. And so confidence is built by making progress. And so confidence is very important. Like, confidence is essential. You wouldn't be doing this podcast if you didn't have some degree of confidence, but it took you courage, and it even still maybe takes some courage, but that's how you build more and more confidence, which gives you more choices and options. Because if you don't have confidence, you're not going to try much. And so confidence is kind of the foundation for acting courageously in the future.
I love that. Thank you so much. When you think about, and especially hearing a lot of how the world defines success, I know that that's different for each person, but what would you say would be an important characteristic for yourself? Like, how do you personally define success, or that term success?
I mean, I'm going to define it differently every time you ask me the question, because I'm always in a different place, but I think mostly it's about living and dying in a way that you believe you should. We're all going to live, and we're all going to die. And so I think success is living the way you believe you should have, and doing the best you absolutely can to do what you were put here to do, or to do what you believe you absolutely could have. I mean, that's kind of my definition of success. And, when it comes to like situational success, I'll have it, if you asked me that question a year ago, I'd have a different answer than I've got today. But I think it's, we're all going to live, and we're all going to die. And so it's just doing what you can with the time you've got.
What would be a legacy that you would want to leave for, your loved ones, your family, your friends? What would be something that you would hope they would remember you?
Probably just, a spiritual foundation, someone who loved God, was doing his best, someone who sought learning and sought sharing, and just live my life to the best I could. I mean, I'm not really that worried about my own legacy, but I'm definitely worried about leaving my kids with something better than I've got, better than I had to start with. And so I would love just to like leave them with less of a legacy and more of a foundation. I want to build a foundation for them to build on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really worried about my own legacy as much as I want to build a foundation so that they can have a better situation and a better faith and a better hope and more to work with than I had to work with.
Absolutely.
And that includes not only financial, but that mostly includes spiritual and their own perspectives, their worldview, their identity, their faith, their ideas. I mean, their situations. So, I mean, I just want to leave them with a higher set of principles and faith.
What are some recent goals that you have that you're working towards right now currently? Like, what are your, I guess, next 3 to 6 months goal?
3 to 6 months?
Or even maybe a year. Like, what is something you've been planning for?
Yeah. So, I mean, my 2020 goals are I want to do, this may sound weird, Don Terrell, but I want to do 600 podcast interviews this year. I want to sell 1 million copies of this book in 2020. So this book comes out in June. I want to sell 1 million copies of this book. That's kind of my one major goal. I mean, I want to sell over 10 million copies of this book in the future, but in 2020, I would love to sell 1 million copies of this. And so obviously that goal shapes my process. And one of the ways that I'm going to try to attempt that is by going on to 600 podcasts. I'm going to write a lot of blog posts and stuff like that. But one major goal is to sell 1 million copies of this, because that opens up a lot of other avenues. If you ask me, my 2 or 3 year goals would be to sell 10 million copies of this, and I have no clue how I'm going to do that. It's a totally delusional, ridiculous goal, but I still believe I can accomplish it. So I'm going to try. But to answer your question, 2020, sell 1 million copies of that.
Now, what's the name of the book that you have coming out in June? Like, help us know where we can find your resources and writing literature online.
The book is called Personality Isn't Permanent. You can find it online. If you go to benjaminhardy.com, you can get 3 free online courses if you pre-order the book. So yeah, just check out benjaminhardy.com.
Awesome. You know what, Ben? Anytime you would like to come on and do a podcast interview, feel free. I can definitely do my part into helping you complete that goal. And I'm so thankful again, like I said, for your time today. And in all honesty, this is like one of the best reunions. I've had the pleasure of talking to one of our other mission brothers who I think you may remember, Jared Ward. Mm-hmm. And it was just great to be able to kind of see my Pittsburgh brothers in that sense. And definitely we will have a reunion in Pittsburgh in the coming years. And we'll have to definitely make sure that we all get together for that.
I love it. Well, yeah, I hope we have a reunion at some point, man.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you so much, man.
Talk to you soon, brother. You're the best.
Thank you for listening to Morrow's Motivational Podcast. Please join us again next time.
Wow, something is really different on the growler. Really different on the growler. Really different on the growler.